We're live. Hi, everyone. I always love the little message. You're live. Whoa. Hi, everyone. We have Sunday, I guess. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Jake's and my second discussion about our Richard Bachman buddy read along. I don't even know really if it's what. I never know what is one, what is the other. Anyway, we've read those books together in a smaller group. And today we're talking about the second set of 3 books that we read in April, May, and July, I think, right? We skipped June.
Yep.
And that is, hang on. Oh God, I had such a good stack and then I messed it all up because I was looking something up, but we read Thinner, and that's book 1 that we will talk about. Then we read The Regulators, which hands down has the coolest cover of all of them. And then we read the last Richard Bachman book, which is Blaze, where I like Jake's cover a lot better. And we thought we start talking just like in a non-spoilery way first about all 3 books. So if you haven't read them yet, you can just listen and see if that is a book that you're interested in. And then at one point we switch over into spoiler for all of the books and then go through that as well, because there's some where we have to talk about some things. Really quick before we dive deep, just in case you don't know Jake, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. My name is Jake. I'm from the channel The Bookish Drummer. I love to read a lot of different types of books, but mainly on my channel, I'm known for making Stephen King content. So, of course, I'm very excited to talk about these 3 Richard Bachman books. So, yes.
And since you are our Stephen King expert, do you want to really quick summarize what, like if we start with Thinner, what Thinner is about?
So Thinner is, let me see if I can hold this. There we go. Thinner starts out with this really overweight lawyer who's not really the best of persons. And it starts out with him basically running over a gypsy, and eventually he gets acquitted of the murder. He essentially gets away with it. And this gypsy puts a curse on him. He rubs his cheek and says, and eventually he starts losing weight drastically, even though he's not exercising, he's not eating very well. He just keeps losing the weight, and he's like, oh, I'm losing all this weight. But then eventually, I mean, it gets dangerous where he's just shedding pounds to the point where it's very dangerous, and he has to figure out a way to stop that.
You summarized it a lot better than I could have, given that we've read that in April. It's like, oh yeah, it was something with the curse and he gets thinner, like hence the title. So thanks for summarizing that.
No problem.
Do you want to start talking about Thinner then in a non-spoiler way, just what we thought?
Yeah, sure. I think first and foremost, I want to give like a brief history of Thinner, because in our first discussion, we talked about 3 of the earlier Richard Bachman books. And essentially the reason he started writing under the Richard Bachman name is because he went to his publishing company and wanted to write more and more books, but they really only wanted to let him write 1 book a year. So he started writing under the Richard Bachman name. And eventually people started to catch on, like, oh, this Richard Bachman guy sounds a lot like Stephen King. And by the time this book came out in 1985, the cat was out of the bag. Like, people knew Richard Bachman is Stephen King. Stephen King is Richard Bachman. So when this book was released, it was a Stephen King book, essentially. And actually, the novel, like a few years after this, Misery, was supposed to be a Richard Bachman novel, but since the cat was out of the bag, it ended up being just a Stephen King novel. So that's how this book kind of came to be. And yeah, I just wanted to give that brief history before we just talked about our thoughts on the book.
That's actually really interesting, and that people already knew that at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've read enough Stephen King to really say, oh yeah, you can draw the conclusions there, because Richard Bachman also, I always find, are slightly different, slightly more harsher, I don't know if that's the right word for that, but they're a lot more brutal and a lot deeper than some of the other. I mean, I haven't read as many as you have, so you can answer that question better than I do. But from what I've read from Stephen King that is not published under Richard Bachman, it, like with Richard Bachman, he always goes one step further. So I find it interesting that people were like, oh yeah, no, that's the same person.
There's a great quote. I don't remember where it's from, but there's a quote that says like, Richard Bachman is Stephen King without a conscience, which makes perfect sense because even in a lot of Stephen King books, terrible things happen, but sometimes, you know, when you get to the end, it can be like hopeful, or sometimes like the people defeat the enemy. With Richard Bachman books, they're very nihilistic and not a lot of great things happen to the characters in the entirety of the book. So
Yeah.
I really agree with that quote.
Yeah, there's no happy ending in any of the Richard Bachman books, which is kind of refreshing if you think about it, because everything is always like, oh, everything is happy ending. But, you know, sometimes it's just not how this works. It's kind of, we need more books without a happy ending. What does that tell about me that I'm saying something like this? All right, let us talk about Thinner. So for me, that was actually the second time I read this book. I read this, oh God, years ago in German, and remembering really liking it because it was so different. And now the first time for me in English, which it was interesting to read, especially this book, knowing what the ending is, and then getting towards the ending. So experiencing that journey entirely different, and like in a slightly different way. I thought that was pretty, like for me at least, that was pretty interesting, because I've also read The Long Walk before, which we talked about in our first show. And there I knew the ending too, but I still felt I experienced the journey in the same way of the book, even though I knew what would happen and how it would turn out. Whereas with Thinner, I had a different experience and I looked at things differently, and knowing what the ending is and where we end up with, what was his name? We looked it up earlier. Billy. Like the experience, the reading experience was very different. Not better or worse or anything, but just the experience itself was very different. You could focus more on characters. You could focus more on, oh, okay, now that you know how everything came together, you see more clues early on. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and this is the second time I've read it as well. And like you, I read it years and years ago when I first started reading Stephen King. So it was a lot of fun. Like you said, knowing how the ending is, like getting to see how we get there. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought this time it was, I hated the wife this time. I couldn't get on with her. Like just decisions she made early on in the book. Because you gave the summary of he doesn't get convicted for the murder, and as the story continues, and then he gets cursed and he gets thinner, and she starts to worry about him. And as the story continues, we always get a little bit like glimpse back into, okay, what happened during the accident. And she says and does things where I'm like, you really didn't get what happened back then during the accident, right? Like you're completely negligent of anything that was going on back then. And like the way she just seems to live her life, ignoring everything and being like in her little bubble and everything is nice. And, I'm not seeing what's happening, so I'm walking away from that. Like this woman, whoa, she really made me angry at times. Like how she dealt with her husband.
Yeah. It's great that Stephen King can get, that reaction from just like not even a main character, just someone, who's not like not a central part of the story, but like a part of the story, just like get that kind of reaction. Like, I think that's pretty cool.
That is very true. And he gets it for all the characters, right? Because he is like, even with Billy, because you're again in Billy's head and understanding where he's from. Like there was a scene at the very beginning where he's in his car, I think he's driving home, and he's eating hamburgers and fries while he's driving, and like stuff drips on his shirt. And the way he thinks about himself eating these burgers right now, like that whole scene was so well written, even though it grossed me out entirely when he started describing like food dripping on him and whatnot. But it was so well written. And yeah, that's something that King does really, really well, and why I love his books so much. But yeah.
And I would definitely agree. Like he's really good at descriptions, especially, when he gets to be thinner and just how he describes his physique and his fatigue because of how thin he is. And
Yeah.
especially when you get really close to the end where it's just like really dangerous. Like I really liked those descriptions.
Yeah. Well, and then also because then, he tries to figure out why he gets thinner and he follows like a certain trail. And even the characters he interacts with, like how those are described. And it's very short scenes every single time, but you know exactly where these people are coming from. You know exactly what they have to do with what's happening to him and how they fit into the story. And I think that is actually really incredible if someone can write a character that you understand immediately after a paragraph and you know exactly what this character is about, where you have other books where you have pages and pages and pages of character description, you're still like, I still don't know what the motivation of this person is. Yeah, he's really good at that stuff. Yeah.
And I think it's a testament to, I made a shameless plug, but I made a video the other day about Stephen King's short books. And I hear a lot of the times people complaining about, oh, I can't read his books, because they're super long. Well, this book is super thin. And even though it is short, like you get
No
a
pun
really
intended.
yeah. Even though it's super short, like you get really good character descriptions and like immediately you get an idea or a picture of like who this character is, what they want, like what they're doing. Like I think King is really good at doing that.
Yeah. Well, even if we think about now that we're talking about this, like if you think about Long Walk, Running Man, Road Work, like the same thing, none of them are long. They're all between like 300, 400. I think Road Work is is it Road Work that is 400 and a little bit? I don't even know. No, that was Regulators. We get to that in a second. But all of those are really, really short, and it's impressive what he builds in those characters and how much emotion he gets out of you in those few pages. And a lot of, well, in fantasy you need a lot of more because you need to explain the world. This is in the real world, so you need less of that. But even if you read other thrillers or other whatever genres that are associated with the real world, like it's not often that you're so deep into the weeds in such a short amount of time. Yeah. Speaking of road work, I thought this book reminded me a lot of road work. Like there are a lot of parallels where I thought, yep, that is like we have a mobster like in road work. But just the way the story progresses and the way Billy goes about, solving his problem, I find it very similar to road work. Also, the thought process and the way you're in Billy's head and the way you're, he interacts with like his family and whatnot. I thought that is like where you have Long Walk and well, Long Walk and Road Work are also close together in the sense of in people's head very deep. Thinner is not as much like that, but it is very close to Road Work in how the story progresses, I think. It's early in the morning. I don't know if I'm making sense right now.
Yeah, sorry. I think another interesting distinction that I'm just now realizing is that with a lot of these Richard Bachman books, there is sort of like a countdown to the end of the book, right? So like the Long Walk, you walk until there's one person left.
Yeah.
Thinner, like the number, like the chapter numbers are like his weight. Let's see if I can find an example. Like he'll drop down to like 137. So like the countdown is going. And with the Running Man, like he has a certain amount of time that he has to do everything, right? So
yeah. What wasn't in the Running Man? I have to look it up later. But wasn't even in the Running Man that he had also that the time the chapter names was the time he had left or something?
Yep. And then in Road Work, there's a date to where like the construction people are going to be at his house, right?
Yes.
I just now realized this.
Yep. Yep.
I don't know what we do with that information, but that is.
I don't know, but it's kind of brilliant that he did it that way. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, they are all leading towards something. And I'm thinking, what? Regulators too. Blaze, you could argue yes, but that's probably, but we talk about that later. But in Regulators too, if you think about it.
A little bit.
Yeah, interesting. Now I'm going to read those. If I read them ever again, I'm going to read those with a whole different conscience. Oh, amazing. I have to get into spoilers, otherwise I have to be careful what I'm saying right now. But I think for Thinner, yeah, I can't talk any further about Thinner without going into spoilers.
Okay.
Do you have anything else before we move to the next book then?
I would just say that Thinner, as far as like my ranking would go, it's one of my favorite Richard Bachman. My favorite is still Roadwork. I think you would probably agree with that. That's my favorite. Yeah. And then after that, either Thinner or Blaze. I'm not sure, but I love both of them. But I'm wondering what you think of it.
Oh, that it depends. That's a good question. So I'm with you on Roadwork. Roadwork is definitely my favorite, no matter the type of story. I really like that one. Long Walk is still very far up as well, just because I love the concept of the whole story. Thinner, I think, is somewhere in the middle. I don't know if I would put it like I liked. Let me go another way around. On Regulators and Blaze, I like them for a different reason. They are not typical Bachman books for me. Mm-hmm. Like, when last time we talked, Running Man is kind of, at the border of being like a typical Bachman book. Like Thinner is more that. But I love Regulators and Blaze for very different reasons, not for them being typical Bachman books, really. So it's kind of hard. I think Running Man is still the lowest. I liked it, and I still like the movie because of Arnold Schwarzenegger. But from a being a book perspective, that's probably the lowest on the ranking. It's still good, but and then Thinner definitely had its moments. I think I have to think about that. Maybe we'll ask me again after we talked about the other two books again.
Sure.
Which gets us into Regulators.
Yes.
And there's also kind of a history to that book, right? There's something special about that book as well. Yes.
So this was written or published in like the mid 90s, and Stephen King hadn't written a Richard Bachman book until this book. And I wish I had like the matching editions you have to like show. Oh, you do? Okay, great. All right. So he basically wrote two books, Desperation and The Regulators. Nice.
It's not the same size, but close enough.
You get the picture, though.
Yeah.
And they're essentially companion novels in the sense that both books have the same characters, but they tell different stories and they have a different feel to them. I've read both of them. For my money, I think most people like Desperation more, but I'm more of a fan of The Regulators. But they are different, but they're kind of weird to talk about if you haven't read both of them.
They're weird, period.
I don't think you've read Desperation yet.
No, I haven't. But Regulators was weird.
It was definitely weird, and so is Desperation. They're both very bonkers books. That's the best way to describe them. They're bonkers.
Oh, I don't even know if we would say like, okay, give me a blurb of The Regulators. I think the best description is like it's just nuts. Just read it. It's so out there. I've never read a book like this that is so out there. I don't even have words for that. Like it was just so good though, if you think about it, what happened. And you can't even say like what subgenre it belongs to, because that would already be kind of a spoiler for the book. Mm-hmm. Because it's not a Richard Bachman type of book. Like you know that pretty early on, I think, that it's like, okay, something is off here. Like something really weird is going on, which is not your typical, it's actually more typical Stephen King book in that regards. But yeah, it's just like all the happenings and then how it unfolds, you're just sitting there like, what the F is going on? Mm-hmm. What? And it was definitely one of those books that I read pretty fast because I needed to understand what's going on. Like, yeah, this thing is messed up.
And it's very atypical for Richard Bachman too, because of the writing style and the structure. Like the Richard Bachman books that came before it, you're basically following one character in their journey, whereas the Regulators, you're bouncing back and forth between all different types of characters.
Yeah. Yes, they do, Nancy. Hey, Nancy, by the way. Yes, they do. And when you have the same size, they actually fit really nicely together. So need covers. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You have a much bigger cast of characters in Regulators because you have an entire, like, it's one street with all the neighbors living in that one street. And it happens to all of them. And all of them are sitting there like, something is really off here. And something is happening. And while it is still kind of enclosed, like the Richard Bachman, where you have one person and you have your enclosed situation, it's, well, we looked at the map earlier. It's 8 neighbors, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 8. And then plus the easy stop at the bottom where we have that random visitor that was just at the easy stop when everything started. So yeah, 8 random people that more or less like each other because they're neighbors, some don't. So you have a lot of random thoughts of those neighbors about the other neighbors and what they think about them, which I think is highly entertaining. Like, you know, suburbia at its finest because the story is written in the like mid 60s something. It's not in the mid 90s, right? I think.
I don't know.
So, I would have to look it up again. Man, May is a long time ago. I don't know the details anymore. But it was like, for someone who didn't grow up in the US, but for me, it was like a very typical US suburbia type of flair and situation in the book. And it was hilarious to see like the thoughts between the neighbors and what they think about each other and how they then all kind of come together because of that situation and are like, okay, how do we solve this? How do we get this done? And how like this external person, the person who was just randomly at that convenience store, how that person all of a sudden is mixed in and helps kind of the people that know each other, helps them move along in that story. Like kind of this external element that you have as part of the story. It's really, I thought that was really well done too.
And it's a different dynamic. I know you haven't read Desperation yet, but it's a different dynamic because in the Regulators, you get these characters and their neighbors. Whereas in Desperation, they're all kind of traveling through this one town called Desperation, and they don't really know each other, and they come together and have to deal with a situation, which again, I don't want to, it's really hard to talk about these books without spoiling them because they're so bonkers. You don't want to give anything away. But they're coming together. Whereas in the Regulators, they, except for that one person, they all kind of know each other and they're familiar with each other. And then they have to deal with like the inciting incident that happens at the beginning, and it just goes from there. And it's nuts. Yeah.
And what I also thought was really interesting in this book, what he does is he, in my version, I actually have letters printed into the book. Like he shows at the end of chapters, he adds information from the past or just like random, like one of them is a postcard with a note to one of the neighbors. And all of that adds up at one point. At the beginning, I was like, what is this now? Like, why are you giving me this random information that doesn't fit into the story at all? And it's actually really confusing at the beginning because so much is happening and none of it fits together. And it's really slowly that you're understanding like, okay, now I'm starting to understand what's happening here. And now I really want to know what's happening here. Where is this all coming from? And I thought that was also so well done after you understood what is happening and how he's writing it up and how he's putting the things together. Also, again, very different to the Richard Bachman books, right? That what you said earlier, like the way he structured the writing, especially with those short glimpses at the end of, wait, where's the right book? Of, letters and whatnot. I'll see if I can find one that doesn't have a bunch of spoilers in it. But I thought that was really well done too. Yeah, like a random news article.
Yep.
And you actually have to read it because the stuff is important at the end of the day. And it was just really well done.
Yeah. I think I do agree with you. Like on a first read, it can be very confusing because like he has these chapters and so much is happening. It's chaos, and then you get this random break where you have to read this apostolary stuff, and you're just like, what does this have to do with anything? And then you get like halfway through the book, and you get further in, you're just like, oh, okay, now I get what's going on.
Yeah. And it's fun because you can play detective a little bit then, because he gives you glimpses in, again, where this is leading towards. And you can then all of a sudden, like just based off those end parts of the, what do you call apostolaries? Is that what the term for that is? Okay. So anyway, for these things, like you start to see connections. You're like, oh, I read something 5 chapters ago. Does this have to do with this? And it's a lot of fun then. Like it's really kind of a nice mystery within the chaos that you can then work through. Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun on rereads because when I reread it, I already knew what was happening. So it was fun to just kind of know what's going on from the get-go. But I get it. Like your first time reading, you're just like, what the hell is this? What is this?
But that was definitely, so, talking about books that I like, that's the reason why I like this book so much. But if I say like typical Richard Bachman books, this would be very far down the road, but just fun, entertaining, and having a blast with, and being like totally like, what? Best book ever. Like just for that reason, really. And then once you figure out what's going on, it's just, I mean, it's brilliant. I definitely have to read Desperations eventually to see, okay, what's happening on that side. And I know it's kind of, isn't it even the same character names, but the characters are all different or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's the same character names, and they have I think they have similar backstories, but they're in completely different situations. And like I said, with the Regulators, they're neighbors, but with Desperation, like they don't really know each other.
Yeah. Yeah. But because of that, I think that can be a whole different trip to read this book. Like now you know a little bit what's going on. So you go into that kind of knowing, but not really. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that confusion of like, oh, I know those names and I've read about them before, but they're totally different characters. I'm really curious to see how that turns out then.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see. I'll be interested to see which one you like more, because that's kind of a big divide with Stephen King fans, whether you like Desperation or the Regulators more. I like the Regulators just because it's bonkers, but also it's briefer than Desperation. Desperation is a little chunkier, so there's some stuff in the middle that kind of goes on a bit too long.
Yeah.
But
but that's okay. Then you read just over those faster, or now that you kind of know what's going on, you can probably go through it a bit faster.
Still a great book though.
Yeah. Although my version has really big font, so maybe not as intimidating. It says 680 pages, but with big font. Yeah. By the way, I don't know if you saw that, but the version, so this is the Desperation version. On the back, like it looks through the fence to the other version, which I think is also pretty neatly done.
Does it do that with the other edition?
Yeah. So the Regulators has also the glimpse into the other world.
Very nice.
Yeah. Little neat Easter eggs. We need more of that kind of stuff, because that has a whole entertainment factor on its own, that you have covers that work together like this and then play into each other. I wonder why not more people have done that. It's kind of a neat concept if you think about it.
And then of course, with King, like Desperation ties into the Dark Tower and a couple of other books, so there's that to look forward to as well.
Right. Can I read, because I haven't started Dark Tower yet, can I read Desperation though already?
Yeah.
Or does it spoil anything in the Dark Tower? No. Okay.
Nope.
Because I think Salem's Lot spoiled something in the Dark Tower, right? Because you need to read, was it Salem's Lot? There was one book that you should read later on.
So you have to read, well, you don't have to, but you should read Salem's Lot before you read Wolves of the Kala, because Wolves of the Kala book 5 will just straight up spoil that whole book.
Oh, all right. Okay. That's good to know then.
Yep.
Also on my big list of, Salem's Lot has been on my list since 20 years now. I don't know. I just haven't gotten to it. Too many books, too many good books.
Yep.
Alrighty, do you want to move on to would you read one before the other? Here's the question. I haven't read them yet. Desperation versus Regulators, I assume Nancy means.
Oh, it doesn't really matter, but I think a lot of people prefer to read Desperation first, but you can do it either way. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So in my case, I read Regulators first. I haven't read Desperations yet, so I'll see if it was a good idea or not. Yeah, I googled that too at one point, and it was very like some said this way, some said the other way. So I didn't really see.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I have fun reading it. That's the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. And don't start too late because it really is bonkers, and you just want to continue and figure out what the hell is going on.
Yeah, very compulsive read.
Yeah. Yes. Regulators is definitely a quick read. Yeah. Alrighty. Last one.
All right. So we've got
spoiler, and then we go into spoiler sections.
Yes. So we have Blaze, which, like the Regulators, he took a break from Richard Bachman. And in fact, this is the last Richard Bachman book ever published, although it has an interesting history. It was released in 2007, but this was actually a trunk novel from Stephen King. He actually wrote the bulk of this in like the 70s, and he didn't really feel like it was going anywhere. He didn't really feel comfortable like trying to get it published. So it was a trunk novel. He just sat on it, and until the mid 2000s, he started reading it again. He's like, you know what, there's got to be something here. So he worked on it again and decided to publish it as a Richard Bachman novel. So this came out, like I said, in 2007, and it is one of my favorites. Be interested to hear your thoughts on it, Josephina.
Yeah. And my version even had like a like it says it's a novel by Richard Bachman, but then with a foreword by Stephen King.
Yep.
And the foreword talks about it too, that he was even thinking about, I think, publishing it as a hard crime. What is that called? Hard case crime novel, but it didn't really fit that piece. So that information was also, I thought, very interesting, and I would agree with that. I don't think it fits a hard case crime novel, whatever that publisher is called. I don't think it fits that at all. Blaze was one of those where I think I had the most empathy with the character. I love Blaze. Like, he is so well written, so relatable is the wrong word, but I really felt for him, and I had moments where I was like, no, why are you doing this? Like, come on, you can have such a great life. Mm-hmm. You're really messing it up for yourself right now. And then, it was devastating. So he, as a character, with all the decisions that he made throughout the book, was just the one that I felt the most for out of all of the Richard Bachman characters. On the other hand, the story itself, like the plot was kind of like, yeah, okay, I kind of liked it. So to summarize, Blaze is a character who actually lived with a friend, and they together went on heists, and they kind of tried to survive with like little like they stole money from people, and now they had kind of like, what is it called, little schemes that they ran, but the friend passed away, but they had one last thing that they wanted to do, which is kidnap a child. And Blaze decides to still go through with that while he is listening to the voice of his friend that he lived with all the time, that he partnered with. So he's kind of seeing him, hearing him, and listening to his advice while he is kidnapping this child. And then, the story continues from that. And it's so from that plot perspective, it was fun. Like, it was nothing that I was super wowed about or really excited about. I kind of like the element of hearing the voice of, I forgot what the name of his friend was.
It's George. And another thing I forgot to mention is that Blaze is essentially Stephen King's version of Mice and Men, right? Because you've got the two. Have you read Of Mice and Men?
Nope.
Okay, well, it's essentially that's okay. It's essentially well, now how do I describe of Mice and Men? I don't know, but
it's a thin book, right? I can read it later, probably in an afternoon.
Yeah, but it's essentially, you've got two characters. You've got one that's kind of like the mastermind behind everything, and then you've got kind of the big, quote unquote, dumb character who doesn't really know like what to do unless he's with George. And that's kind of what this is, except it's Stephen King writing it, so of course George dies, but Blaze can still hear his thoughts, and George is telling him what to do even and death. So it was an interesting take on a very classic tale.
All right. Well, now I definitely have to move that up my TBR, so maybe I can squeeze that in September. I won't have time in August, I don't think, but maybe in September. That has me curious now. So yeah, but that plot itself, I mean, it was good, right? It was not a bad plot. It was not a bad premise or anything. But I agree with like Stephen King in the foreword that I was reading, and you kind of said the same thing. What he was saying is kind of like, yeah, he didn't like the book too much either, but he wanted to publish it because it was there. You know, it would have been a waste, kind of type of thing. But he didn't love it too much either, and I would agree with that. Like, I don't love the premise of it. I loved Blaze though as the character. He was phenomenally well written, and yeah, as I said, like that was really an emotional journey for me following along with Blaze. But it's still, I mean, in typical Stephen King fashion, he is just so good because that plays in winter, so it is deep snow, like feet of snow that they like live in during that time, and that he has to walk through and whatnot. And he's just so good in setting those scenes and writing those scenes where Blaze is just walking through the snow in the dark and like all that kind of stuff. Really, I was sitting there and I could imagine the feel of him being cold and of him being wrapped up in all the clothes that he had to protect himself from the cold, and you know how he's going through with the plan and how he's listening to George. Like, just that was one of the better books, just the way it is written. Like, from that perspective, it was, yeah, definitely high up on my general King list.
I would totally agree with you, and you're right. It's a very simple premise, but like a lot of King's books, like have really silly premises or just really simple ones. But this one, like you're right, the character of Blaze is just outstanding. Does a great job with the characterization, and just like you said, you just get a lot of empathy for him, and I think King does that really well.
Yeah. Which is weird because with the other characters, when you look at Richard Bachman books, so this is typical Richard Bachman in the sense of you're in one person's head again, right? And you're following their thoughts and what they're going through. But very not so typical because that character is very different to the guy in Long Walk and Running Man and Roadwork, and even Thinner, because they are all, I don't know, they are very different. I can't even put really my feelers out because Thinner, that guy is just sleazy. But in Running Man, that guy is actually a really upstanding guy who's just trying to get around in that world he lives in. Blaze is just so innocent. And the other characters, none of them, even if they're good or bad or sleazy, they are not really innocent. So he wrote something really special here with Blaze, I think.
Yeah, and I think the dichotomy of like having this innocent person do such a terrible deed is really intriguing.
Yeah, and him not really not fully understanding what it is that he's actually doing. I mean, he's also talking about all the heists that he's actually done while George was still alive, and there's never like a feel of I'm doing something wrong. Like, it's just, okay, this is how I learned life works, right? How you get around and how you survive somehow. And it's a very fascinating view of living like that, of a person the way Blaze is, of the person like Blaze. Yeah. Oh yeah. I need to read it again now that I'm talking about it.
Well, like I said, it's certainly one of my favorites. Like Roadwork is number one, but Blaze might be my second favorite. I'd have to think, but it's really high up there for me.
Yeah, and that's why it's so hard, like, to your questions after Thinner, like which is your favorite, like out of all the 6 Richard Bachman books. That's why it's so hard to answer for me, because it depends on what you look at. From a just the reactions it got out of me, Blaze and Regulators are high up because Regulators is just so messed up and I was just sitting like, what? Whereas Blaze was just pure emotion, which the other 4 books didn't get as much out of me. But when it comes to like that psychological thriller and being in someone's head, Roadwork is phenomenal in that regards. And that's not just, so Roadwork is not just from a character perspective, but also the plot is just amazing. I love all of it, like everything that happens with the character and why he's making those decisions. And Long Walk is just phenomenal because the story itself, like that dystopian aspect of why they're doing that long walk, is just so messed up too. And the way he wrote those 16-year-old boys is just phenomenal. So it's really hard because it depends on which aspect of the book you're looking at.
Yeah, and they all do different things well.
Yeah.
And like you said, like something like the Regulators, like it's a really fun read, but I wouldn't say I get attached to any of the characters like I would Blaze or Barton Dawes from Roadwork. Like those are fantastic characters, but the plot in both of those books I wouldn't say are as bonkers or as entertaining as something like the Regulators, though. So they all do different things well.
Yeah, agreed. Alrighty, want to move into the spoiler section?
Yes.
Okay, let me just throw this up just in case someone comes around. Alrighty, jumping back to Thinner. Oh yeah, wait, my stack is now the wrong way around. Here we go. By the way, this is a cover I love too with that.
Yeah, I really do like that cover. Yep.
Yeah. That already tells you what's going on there.
Probably like how he looks towards the end of the book.
Yeah, or even worse. I even remember watching the movie.
Oh yeah.
A long time ago. Yeah. So Thinner spoiler thoughts. So I alluded to that, like this wife. Oh my goodness, like the amount of it's not my fault. Like I was not in the car too of the accident. It's not my fault. I didn't distract him. Like, like this ignorance from her.
Yeah.
The amount of ignorance from her, because she walks away at one point from him, right? Because she can't stand looking at him, that he gets thinner and thinner, and there's no inkling of, oh, let me help you, let's figure this out, I believe you, none of this. Like it's all like, no, you're insane and I'm walking away from you now. Woman, seriously. It was your fault at the end of the day. Like it would have never happened if you wouldn't have distracted him out of the blue.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I agree.
So yeah, I don't know. So it's kind of like, I know we're jumping right into I'm jumping right into the end here, but I'm kind of sitting there like, she really messed this up too, because at the end, she was supposed to eat the cake, right? That was the whole, he trades her life for his because he's realizing that she is such a person. But then the daughter eats the cake together with the wife, and then he decides to eat it too. I'm like, great. Yeah. Not even at that point he can get his kind of satisfaction in that regards.
Great example of the Richard Bachman nihilism.
Mm-hmm.
Like you go through this whole story and the guy finally figures out how he's gonna solve his problem, and then
Yeah. I mean, even the fact that he says, yeah, I'm willing to sacrifice my wife for me to be healthy again, like that tells you already what that marriage is.
That alone would have been a crazy ending. Like, oh,
yeah,
kill my wife and I'm gonna live, but nope, you had to go the extra step. Like, oh nope, your whole family's gonna die.
Even your innocent little daughter. Well, I mean, he is a weird guy too, right? If you like, he's also one of those kind of like, I live in my bubble and I'm happy and I have all the money and I'm good, kind of person, and doesn't see the bad he has actually done in that regards. I mean, they're even really negative about the gypsies at the beginning of the book, even after he got the curse, and even as he realized what's happening, he is still kind of like, I don't want to have anything to do with those people, and this is not okay, and I didn't do anything wrong, right? There's very little or very late understanding from him on what he has actually done in the car accident.
Yeah, he's not he's an interesting character to like get his perspective, but he's in no way, shape, or form like a decent human being, I would say.
No, not at all. And that's what I find is actually interesting in Thinner, because again, when you think about Running Man and Long Walk, they're decent people, right? I mean, Long Walk to an extent, how decent a 16-year-old can be, but he does it for the right reasons, right? He joins Long Walk for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Whereas in Running Man, the guy also joins the games for the right reasons. Whereas in Thinner, it's just like a spoiled kind of white big man fat man
rich,
who,
rich lawyer.
yeah, who thinks, you know, the world belongs to him, who runs into that situation, and being in that kind of person's head was really interesting to see what he thinks through and how much he um, ignores the common sense in that regards, and how much he ignores his own fault in that whole situation was really fascinating to read about. Yeah.
It's sometimes a lot of fun about terrible people.
Well, but that's what I like about it, right? That King, or Bachman in this case, experiments with those kind of things. It's not always like the chosen hero or something. You know, sometimes you have to write about the villain too, and that's kind of what Thinner does really, really well in that regards, I think.
Yep. I would
Yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah. I don't know. That's kind of it with Thinner. It's a really simple story, I find, right? It's like, okay, you have your curse and you figure out the curse, and then, you know, you follow that guy on the journey. There's not much more to it. I mean, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just like that's the story. You follow him around while he's traveling around, following the, like, on the hunt of the gypsy so he can get that curse taken off. And then you have the interaction with the gypsy at the end of the day where he gets the cake from that person. Very fascinating. Like, even, oh yeah, there the scene where he's even trying to blackmail the gypsy person of some sort to get the cake, because the gypsy doesn't want to give him the cake. He's like, no, you deserve everything.
Yeah, I forget what he says, but it's just like, you're gonna rot away and you're gonna be like bones or something.
Yeah, yeah. That was also, yeah, till the end. He's really not realizing it till the end what he's doing wrong, and that he doesn't even have an inkling of, okay, it's my fault. I'm sorry that I killed your wife, daughter. I think it was the daughter. Yeah. So yeah, really messed up in that regards.
It makes me want to go rewatch the movie. I haven't seen it in a long time. Who's the actor who plays Billy?
Oh, hang on. Let's Google that real quick.
I can't remember.
The movie is also called Thinner, right?
Yes.
Is that Billy Halek?
Yep.
Oh, the movie is also 1996. It's a bit older too.
Mid-90s.
Starring Robert John Burke. No, that's a different movie. Wait, hang on. Where's my IMDb when I need it?
I can imagine what he looks like. I just can't remember his name. I'm terrible with names.
Well, yeah. Okay, Thinner, the 1996 version. Here we go. Robert John Burke, not Billy Halek. I don't know why Google told me that. It's stars Robert John Burke, it says.
Okay.
Yeah. He's Billy. Oh, Billy Halek is the name of the main character. Yeah. Not really characters, like, I mean, not really super big names in the movie. But yeah, I have to watch that again too. That has been a long while.
I don't know why I was thinking it was like John Goodman or something, like someone famous. Can't remember.
It would fit but John Goodman is a big guy in its own. He was big in the mid-90s, right? He was a big guy.
Yeah.
So I think with what's his face again? I'm really terrible. I just looked at it. Robert Burke. He's a thin man. They just put him in a fat suit.
Oh, I see.
I think. I don't know. I'm watching the trailer on the side and he's just eating. And the trailer. Yep, that fits the book. Okay, yeah, that has to be watched at one point.
Yes.
Ah.
Do we want to move on to the next one, or do I have anything else to say about Thinner?
I don't think so. I was just thinking out loud about how many of these books have been made into movies, and it was just Running Man and Thinner, right?
Well, The Long Walk should have been made into a movie, but I think it's being adapted now, but I have no idea when it's coming out. But that is the one I think out of all of these, I think would lean towards being the best one, because the premise is so simple, and they really should have done it when dystopian movies were being popular, like Hunger Games. Like, that would have been a perfect time to do it, but
Yeah. Yeah, very true. I mean, you could make Blaze into a movie too.
You could, yep.
Regulators, I don't know. That would be bonkers.
Re-
So
reg-
yeah.
Regulators would make like a fun animated thing.
Oh, that is very true. If you make, yeah, that is very true. If you make it into something like that, that could work. Although with CGI where we are at the nowadays, you could do a lot of things. But
Yeah.
yeah. All right, regulators. What the hell, man? I mean, the moment I figured out that there's an alien living in Seth and that alien is doing this with his mind, I don't know, something.
Tack.
Yes, Tack the
Tack.
alien. Like brilliant. I mean, there's just so many things in the regulators that are just brilliantly like brilliant and so well done and so well executed. And yeah, I mean, you start off with a car going around the corner and randomly shooting at people, a car that then people start realizing as they think more and more, like the neighborhood, right? As they think more and more about it, is like completely um not even a typical car, not even typical guns or anything, and the way the bullets put holes into things that it's not normal. Like it takes them so long to figure this stuff out,
Yeah.
and oh yeah, I mean that was just all of it. All of it was so good. And as the neighborhood slowly turns into the desert with those characters, and that they realize it really closes up, and you can't get out of this neighborhood to because they are trying to leave um, to the other around the corner to some other people around the corner in the next street, and they just realize they cannot leave this whole thing. It is just all sorts of messed up. Like this whole thing, toys coming to life,
Mhm.
aliens in people, aliens that hide while the person that it's living in is pooping. What is happening? Or the mother, like Seth's aunt, not the mother, it's the aunt, I think, right, where he lives right now. Um, that she has kind of like a hiding place that is in her mind. That's something that I haven't fully understood where she's actually going, but that she's kind of hiding somewhere else,
Yep.
um, like in a metaphysical world or something. I don't know.
I think also like King's trust in the readers to like just to keep going and then figure out because you don't learn like what you don't get a full grasp on like what is happening until like way later in the book.
Oh
So I think
yeah,
King just trusting the reader to like keep going and to put the clues together, and then you find out like, oh, it's like this tack dude is in this child, Seth. You're just like, what? Like this is what it is the whole time.
yeah.
Ugh,
And then how you figure out how it got there, right? Like that's what I really love about this book too, that backstory that you get on how Tack got there and what happened to get to the point where they are now, like how his parents died, how he got to move to his aunt, like all that kind of backstory is also just so nicely wrapped up and explained. Yeah. I mean, so I don't know if it's trust in the reader or if it's just the way he wrote it, because you don't want to stop. You're sitting there and like, okay, what is going on? I need to continue to figure out, right? I never had a moment where I was like, what is going on? I want to DNF the book. I never had this moment
yeah.
because he keeps going and going, and then something else happened, and then something other thing weird happens. You're like, how are these things connected? This is just so off and so random.
Need an explanation.
Yes. And then you get those random explanations from, random news articles or random letters that were sent at one point to someone you don't even know who that is at that point. It's like, how is this all connected? He just wrote like all of this chaos and all of this mess in a way that you just had to continue as well, right? Yeah. I couldn't have stopped and then said I would have sat there and was like, okay, I need to get back to the book to figure out what's happening. Like it would have stuck in my head as what's going on with this book. Yeah.
And so now that you've read the regulators, I can't say that it's the same characters or most of the same characters from the regulators. You also get Tack in Desperation, but it's a little different, and it'll be fun to get your reaction of Tack. And you get uh by the end of Desperation, you get a little bit of like what Tack is and like where it came from, and it's interesting. So
Okay.
it'll be a lot of fun to get your reaction to that.
All right. Yeah, we don't know much except for that that he came from that mine. That kind of tech called for Seth when they were visiting that mine. But besides that, yeah, you don't know much. Like some ancient thing. But that's kind of the extent to it. But yeah, I mean, this book was just, again, I mean, King is just so good in describing scenes. And I vividly remember the scene where they're going out the backyard. There's like this forest walk behind one side of the street where they can get, if they walk through that kind of forest type thing, that they get to the neighboring street, and they are venturing out, like the small group that is venturing out to get out of it and get help.
Mm-hmm.
And how that slowly turns into the desert, and all of a sudden they have a cactus there, and there's someone tied around the cactus. But if you turn around, there's still that walkway with the trees that is actually there, and like this surreal scene. And it was so well written. I was just sitting there smiling because, like, this is so messed up. What is happening? Yeah, it is really well done. And also the way you describe the toys that come to life and all the scene things that are happening. And again, character work, right? In such a short book, I think that's the longest out of all of them.
Yeah.
That you know exactly where all the neighbors are coming from and what's going on with the neighbors and how they interact with each other on a normal life. Like in really good ways, he included all of that information so you could actually understand, you know, why certain neighbors react in certain ways and how that strange person, like the external person, kind of fits in and how he takes over in some cases, or, you know, really interesting. Not as deep as any of the other books, like the characters of any of the other books, but still actually pretty well written for the 400 something pages that this book is, I think.
Yeah, I'd say out of all of these books, like you read this book for the plot and you're trying to figure out what is happening, and the characters kind of like the characters are great, but they're kind of like an added bonus.
Yeah, very true. Yes, it's very much turnaround in this book. But yeah, like all the scenes of
Stacy.
say, "Hi, Stacy." Do you want to stay for the spoilers? We're in the middle of the spoilers right now, or are you hopping off now? She's probably hopping off.
Yeah.
But yeah, also like the whole fact, once they start puzzling the pieces together of like, no, that's a toy my kid has. Kinda, yeah. A messed up one, but yeah. Are you making Stacy read the Regulators?
Well, I'm trying to just get her to read more King in general, so maybe I should just add that to the list.
Last time we added Running Man to her list, so I think that would make sense.
Yeah,
I think Stacy would have fun with that.
She's definitely more of a plot-driven reader than
Yeah.
a character-driven reader, which doesn't suit well for most King books, right?
Very true. Very true. Yeah, no, then the Regulators, I think, would be a lot of fun for you, Stacy. I think you would have a lot of fun with that.
Is there any more spoilery thoughts on the Regulators?
No, I think we stated that it is a messed up book and that everybody should read it more than enough.
It's nuts. That's the summation of it.
Yes, but in a good way, in a really, really good way. All right, Blaze, the emotional one. Man, we are going from fun to English, Josephine English, to desperation. No, that's the other book, but oh my god, emotional. That's the that ending. Oh my goodness. Like I don't know that I've ever felt so much for a character like I have for Blaze. I felt so sorry for that guy that he got. I mean, the thing is, it's the relationship between George and Blaze was for Blaze a good one, right? He helped Blaze really get on with his life and get his life together, and you know the basic things like eat regularly and eat healthy and change your clothes every day, like those little things.
Yep.
The Dead Zone, Gerald's Game, The Outside, and Dolores. Oh, I'm curious what you think. Gerald's Game is also more, if I remember that correctly. That has been a long time that I read that. Also very messed up.
Mm-hmm.
That is also Gerald's Game is also ones where I said that would be a good Richard Bachman book.
Yes. And we could, if you want to, talk about like potential Stephen King books that would be good to read, like that feel like Richard Bachman books. That would be a good example.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, scroll. But I mean, it is such a weird thing where this relationship was actually healthy for Blaze, but it ended up in, well, George was good and bad for Blaze. Like that's kind of how you can put it, right? Like he helped him actually live, but then obviously they made some really dumb decisions, and because of that plan for kidnapping that baby, Blaze kind of was completely over his head with that scheme. And I felt so sorry. Like he was, he made some dumb decisions in this whole thing, and I would have loved for him to get away. But again, knowing Richard Bachman and knowing Stephen King, we all knew how it would end. But man, that was devastating. Till the end, I was still sitting there hoping that he somehow gets away with the child. And
yeah, it's like you said, definitely one of the more emotional Stephen King books that you'll find, just because of how much empathy you grow to have for the character as the further you get on in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you buddy read Gerald's Game, I actually don't know if I'm going to read Gerald's Game again. I liked it, but I don't know if that's one that I would read again. Maybe not soon. There are other books that I want to read first, I think. We'll see. Yeah, and it's again just the way he sets the scene, the atmosphere of the book with in the winter and it being just a lot of snow, it's being freakishly cold, and how he is kidnapping the kid and then later running away with the kid, and oh my goodness, it was so vivid, and it was so easy to immerse yourself into that scene and into that world, quote unquote, and follow along on how he's doing. I'm just always amazed, like how well King does that.
And George, like, just helping, even though they're doing like a terrible thing, like George is like reminding him, like, oh, when you steal the baby food, like you got to do this to like keep the baby alive, right? So he's even though they're kidnapping the baby, George is there to like make sure that it doesn't die, right? So
yeah. Well, and continues to help Blaze too, right? Like, when have you changed your clothes the last time?
It's like very simple things that like he should already know how to do by himself, but just
yeah, it is really good. Yeah, and then I just had another thought. Now it's gone. Shoot.
Uh-oh.
Can't have been important then.
It'll come back.
Yeah, eventually. Oh, the relationship with the child, that was the other one. How much Blaze loved this kid and how much he grew to getting used to the child and basically saying, I don't want to give you away anymore. Like, I love you right now, right? You're like, that was also kind of something weird that was written in a way where, like, why do I empathize with this right now? He needs to give the child back, but I don't want him to give the child. I want him to keep the child because he loves it so much, right? It is this thought process that you go through in this book. It's just what?
And I know you haven't read Of Mice and Men, but like thinking about that book and like I won't spoil it, but like stuff that happens in that book, like knowing that Blaze has this baby, the whole time, if you've read that book, you're just, I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, you're just hoping that nothing bad happens. You're just like, oh.
Yeah. And I think this, again, Richard Bachman, all the stuff that happens is always bad. Like the ending is always bad for all the characters, right? No happy ending. But with Blaze, that was the one where I really was sitting there like, no, there has to be a happy ending here somehow. But at the same time, I was thinking, like, how? Like, he has to give the child back. He has to pay for what he did. And then I came up with like weird things, like maybe they hire him as a nanny. There has to be a good way out of this.
Oh no.
Which is so ridiculous.
That's a good one.
but yeah, that was the one where like I had no idea how much that would hit like from an emotional perspective because when you don't know anything about it, the stuff that you hear is like it was kind of one of Stephen King's books that he had forever in the trunk, as you told earlier, and that he was kind of himself not really excited about, and that he didn't like too much, and was even thinking should he even publish that, right? And he did a lot of work then years later, and knowing all of this, you sit there like, okay, I don't go in there with much expectations. It's probably just yet another one of those books um, that no one really wanted to publish, not even himself.
Yeah.
And then you end up with something like this where you just sit there and like, okay, I'm broken now. Yeah, it was a good one. And the more I talk about it, this has to be really high up somewhere because of that. Even though it's not from a plot perspective, it's kind of but it's those things just with the character and how he was as a person and how he dealt with the situation just because of that.
And at the end of the day, Stephen King is known for his character work, so it makes sense that this is. I think it's severely underrated. Like, not a lot of people have read it, so if you're watching this, go read Blaze because it's tremendous.
Yeah. Well, if you're watching this now, you probably have read it already because otherwise we would have just told you what the book is about. But yes, I agree. It's one of those underrated ones. Like a lot of Richard Bachman books, if you think about it. Like a lot of people don't talk when they talk about King, they don't talk about the Richard Bachman books in general.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think they are very refreshing and very interesting for a lot of reasons, depending on the book. For each individual, each individual book has a reason why you should read it. Because it just gives you such a good view into humanity and what people go through just in general, like what different types of people go through.
And you get a wide range of characters in all of the Richard Bachman books. Like you said, like, you read Blaze, completely different character from Billy, and Thinner, completely different character from Barton Dawes and Roadwork. So a lot of good variety there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you should read it, Stacy. I don't know.
Which, Blaze or Regulators?
I think Blaze. But she's read two of some of my favorite Stephen King books, Carrie and Misery, and she did not have good things to say about either of them. So
yeah, then I don't know if Blaze is the right one for you, because Carrie gets pretty close to, when it comes to the type of character Blaze is. Carrie comes pretty close to, in certain ways. I mean, it's a very different character, Carrie, that is, but there are certain similarities between Carrie and Blaze that if you didn't like Carrie, I don't know if you like Blaze. Less paranormal stuff with Blaze.
Yes. And it's also interesting too when you think about, there's some Richard Bachman books that don't really have supernatural elements, but then you got a couple that do. Like
Regulators.
Yeah, Regulators. But even something like Thinner, where it's like that could have really so
yeah, that's true. You know what Regulators reminds me a little bit of? The Institute. Also completely underrated King book, I think, with the amount of, okay, this is a really weird situation. Like, why are you in this institution, children?
Mm-hmm.
And then the resolution of what happened to them. The plot is very different. Like, obviously, there's a lot more stuff happening. Institute is, I think, also a lot longer than Regulators. But just the having chaos at the beginning and then trying to figure out what in the world is going on with these children. And then the resolution that I don't want to talk about just in case. Yeah. Man, King just wrote so many good books. Slowly going through them.
Yes, I would agree.
Alrighty. I'm taking off the spoilers because I think the other thing that we wanted to briefly talk about, I know we talked about that last time too, just a little bit, is okay, what's next? What are other books that are Bachman-ish? We listed a bunch of them the last time, but that are Bachman-ish, and then how we continue. So Misery is one. Yeah, go ahead.
I've got some examples here. Like Misery is the clear example because, like I said earlier, it was supposed to be a Bachman book until he was outed. So So that's pretty much the perfect example.
Yeah.
But then you've got other ones like Different Seasons is a novella collection, but in it you have Apt Pupil, which I'm surprised he didn't just publish this as a Richard Bachman novel because it reads so much like a Richard Bachman novel. And have you read it before?
No, I haven't, but I have that new short story collection where you have like it's in a slider thingy with 4 different books.
Yep.
And that one, when I read the synopsis, I was like, oh yeah, that's going to be one of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that it so much feels like a Richard Bachman. And then you've got Full Dark No Stars, yet another novella collection, and all like the title says, full dark. A lot of these are on the darker side. 1922 definitely feels like a Richard Bachman, so
Yeah.
I would include that. And then if we want to throw in another one, Revival is very close to Richard Bachman, although I guess the style of writing is very different. But the ending is the main reason because it's just one of the most nihilistic endings you'll ever read. Like Thinner is pretty nihilistic, but this is just, oh my god. So those are some examples.
Yeah. Did Regulators have a nihilistic ending? I know we are not in the spoiler section anymore, but that might be the only one that doesn't fit that.
I would agree with that, although that's probably the least Richard Bachman-ish book. So
in general, yeah.
Maybe that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was more about the concept that you have 2 books written by 2 different authors that tell a very similar story. I love the concept, and I really have to get to desperation at one point, but I love that concept. Anyway, sorry, scroll. And I think last time, I mean, Carrie fits the bill a little bit more on the paranormal side, but Carrie fits that bill a little bit too. And I think last time, didn't we mention Dolores Claiborne last time too?
Yeah, Dolores Claiborne does make sense because you're in one character's perspective throughout the whole story, and very simple tale. And I wouldn't say the only reason I would be hesitant is because of the ending. Like it's not a Richard Bachman ending.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots to do. I know that Misery is definitely a book for October for me. So that's going to be an October read. So if you want to join that, and I'm saying wink, wink, there's something coming, wink, wink. You might want to keep an eye out on Jake's channel for that. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to Misery in October. So that's going to be interesting. And then I have that short story thing here with Apt Pupil and I think 1922. No, wait. Oh, but I have 1922 separate. I have that as an individual book.
Okay, nice.
They're shorter, probably not October because they're too short. But
They're both novellas, so
yeah, but that could be something too. Yeah, I mean, there are more books for us to explore in our Richard Bachman-ish. We have to change it then. It's then Richard Bachman-ish.
Ish.
Books, yeah. I need to that's the thing with King. He has so many books out. I don't think I'll ever get to reading all of them at one point, but there's still so many that I really, really want to read from him.
Just read the good ones.
Well, but that depends on who you ask, right?
That's the problem.
Ooh, I'm sure I will. Thanks, Stacey. And then also watch the movie afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Salem's Lot is definitely one of those. Like the whole Dark Tower series, I definitely want to read that one eventually. I don't know, like Dark Tower for me is, I stayed away from that for a long time because I'm not huge into like Western style type stuff. Mm-hmm. But I've heard, because a lot of people did read-alongs recently, I've heard a lot of good things where I'm like, okay, this sounds just plain weird, and that's probably why I should read it.
Yes, so the first book is kind of that's where you get a lot of the Western feels, because that's like you're meeting Roland and he's in a Western setting. But then after that, book 2 is my favorite. Completely bonkers, really good. Same thing with book 3. Some really weird and wacky stuff. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people get the impression that the whole series is like The Gunslinger and that it's a Western fantasy, when in reality there's elements of sci-fi and horror, and it gets kind of meta towards the end, and there's a lot of weird elements. So I think people should go into it knowing that it's not just Western fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the reason what turned me around then, because as you just said, a lot of people said like, no, there's so much more to it. Like, okay, bonkers is always good. And that's what you really, really want. Yeah. Yeah. Alrighty. Anything else that we need to cover as part of our official Richard Bachman read along, since we are now moving away from Richard Bachman books? Well, you're actually reading Rage 2 now, right? Aren't you reading Rage this month?
I've already read it, and I stand by it. It's my least favorite Bachman book. I'm not a huge fan of it. I've already filmed my rant review about it, so look forward to that this Friday. That's coming out, so look forward to that.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, you said that at the beginning, that you originally didn't want to read it at all. And I think Stephen King himself says, I'm distancing myself from this book. No one can publish it anymore, and I don't want this to be available anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. It's even hard to get a copy of it unless you get like a used beat up copy like I do of like the set of Bachman books. Like it's almost impossible to find just like a paperback copy, like an original. Like they go for like $1,000. Just like, no, I'm good. I don't need to spend that kind of money on it.
Yeah, I only have a beat up German version, so yeah. No, I understand why he made that decision. But anyway. All right.
This is a lot of fun, by the way. It's so much fun talking to you about all these Richard Bachman books.
It is, because they're so special. Like, they're so unique in the way they're written, and they're perfect for talking about, like having more in-depth conversations about it. And yeah, I appreciate that you're sharing all your thoughts, because you have all that background knowledge about King and Bachman, and where stuff is coming from. So that always, especially for books like this, I find it's really helpful to just get an even wider view of the book itself and why certain things are the way they are. Yeah. Yep. We're not done yet, though. Now we're moving into the Richard Bachman-ish body read. Yep. Awesome. All right. And Nancy just bought a hardcover of Thinner. Yes.
Awesome.
Very good. And she had, knowing Nancy, she is done with it probably tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Nancy, you might have seen her as Twainy on Discord. She is the one that always reads a lot of stuff. She is really fast with reading.
Nice.
Yeah, so amazing. Awesome. Alrighty, well then, for all of you watching, have a great Sunday, or whenever you watch it, have a great rest of your day. Check out Jake's channel. Wait, there. And definitely keep an eye on Jake's channel. There's some really fun stuff coming. I'm sure if I say anything more, he is going to kick me underneath the table soon. And then, yeah, we'll keep you updated on other live shows where we talk about Bachman-ish books and other King books, and generally, I'm sure Jake and I will have more live shows going on going forward. Awesome. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.